Hello, and welcome to the Luminaries Podcast with Rose Associates. I'm Kathleen Rose, the podcast host, and we finished out a series, a trifecta of conversations with three luminaries in the real estate industry, and now we're moving into economic development. And you might wonder, why do I have a naturopathic doctor talking to us about economic development? Well, you're about to find out because public health is very much an economic development issue as well as a land use issue. Today we have Dr. Lexi Lain with us, is the owner and chief executive officer of E10 Academy and also Summit Vitality. But in her E10 Academy, she focuses on helping leaders and professionals overcome their barriers to wellness, calm stress, and have more energy. And through her passion to see people lead healthy lives physically and emotionally, she helps her clients manage their stress with a variety of things, including educational talks and programs, naturopathic medicine, and massage therapy. So, Dr. Lexi earned her doctorate degree in naturopathic medicine from Bester University in Seattle, Washington, and a bachelor's degree in biology from Oklahoma State University. She's presented nationally and internationally through virtual events, hosted wellness workshops for iHeartMedia and other local corporations, and has been a featured guest on radio talk shows, including this one. Well, we're not radio, but ta-da. She's also past international chair of the Rotary Club International of Davidson and a three-time half Ironman finisher. Her mantra is stop asking me what you should be taking for something and ask me what you should be doing instead. Presently, she is building her community of healthy leaders, bringing wellness into the workplace in her 8-week Get Your Spark Back program. She's also qualified for national championships in triathlons in her spare time, training, racing, meditation. So you not only talk the talk, you walk the walk or run the walk.
Yes, I do. Yes.
Yeah. And I've known Dr. Lexi and admired her for years. And her approach to health and healthy communities is very unique among what we know as medical practitioners. So she looks at it from the whole community perspective. And certainly in our work that we do in real estate, economic development, land use, the underlying issue is having healthy communities and then in the workplace, healthy people, right? So to me, this is part of a public health conversation, and public health is economic development, is land use. So of all your accomplishments and accolades, Dr. Lexi, what has had the most impact on you and the work that you do with your clients?
Yeah, it's becoming a triathlete. And then I would say that my 10-day meditation. So these aren't going to be major accolades in terms of certifications and awards, but when you are showing up in the work that you do in the best version of yourself, you are providing a better service. And I definitely felt that burnout as a healthcare professional, and I saw how it impacted my productivity, my bedside manner, how I was with people. And so the key was to make time. And it's an accomplishment to be able to make time and commit, especially as a business owner and an entrepreneur. And then I did tons of volunteer activities in the community. So that balancing out your time and making your own health a priority, that for me has been the biggest and best thing that I've done for myself, but not only me, it's for the people that I'm working with.
Right. And we're talking now about, speaking of, we're talking about talent attraction, and everybody now wants this flexible schedule because I think through COVID, people started to realize what's really important in life, right? I mean, so that was interesting. And we talk about worker productivity. I mean, if you're stressed out, you're not functioning at your highest level.
Correct. Yep. And we can explain that through the physiology in the brain. And what happens is when we are in that fight or flight response or that high stress reaction in our brains, the higher thinking and critical thinking and even creative thinking gets shut down biochemically because we're just in this I gotta survive mode. And so that is why when you're facing an issue and you can't really find the solution to the problem until you take a moment and you go and you walk away from the problem, go get some fresh air, and then you come back. What's happening is when you go outside, get some fresh air, then your brain is shifting away from that fight or flight response. And then we are able to access that higher functioning that we really need to be able to perform at our most optimal level, right? So, yeah, a stressed brain does not function well. And then what happens is we start to be unkind to others. Our fuse gets really short for people, and you can see it. You can see the stress on the road. You can see the stress in the grocery store. And so how to stop, breathe, and ask yourself what you need, taking these little micro breaks, it's what's really important. But we can explain what's happening in the brain in those moments.
Yeah, we're even seeing that in community development, right? I mean, it used to be when we developed neighborhoods, it was all about the pool and the tennis court. Now everybody wants to be adjacent to or have access to a walking trail, a biking trail. In fact, we were out on the Greenway yesterday in the Emerald Necklace in Cornelius and part of it and into Davidson, and they're all slowly interconnecting. And aside from the pollen blowing around, it was, it really was nice to get out there and get that exercise. And we're even seeing that in worker locations. The workplace is changing. They want different amenities and things in the workplace. So you can't just go into a cold, sterile building, windowless in some cases, and expect people to produce at the highest level.
That's correct. Yes, absolutely. And studies do show that when workers see, even if it's a fake tree in the workplace, they actually will have a response to that on like, okay, I can see some nature, or pictures on the wall that have images of nature. You can see that their productivity actually does improve. And so we are primal in that the basis of us, we need to connect back to our natural environment. And that has to be an important piece to a community development. And because of just so much that nature does in fact bring, and versus from like community to active living to the connection aspect. So when I first moved to Davidson, I really valued the walkability of the community and being able to bike to work. And so, and I use the quotations because there's a culture of people like me who wants to bike to work, but having that as an option, and that is appealing to a place. And then if you don't own a car, having a bike is a great option. So just thinking about health equity and in communities that are a little underserved. And so transportation, those green spaces can actually help for connection as well. So just kind of thinking big picture versus affluent neighborhoods as well.
Well, what's interesting about that, we see it both in building design. They call it biophilic design, I think, which is that connection to nature and the living walls and things that we see. It's just so soothing, right? And also the new conversation in land use is universal design, which means that things are designed for people with all abilities. A lot of folks don't realize that 13% of our population has a disability of some sort, either physical or emotional. And a lot of that is, stress triggered like PTSD. So, it's important to think about not all disability is visible, right? For some people.
That's fair. That's fair. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And, and being able to have access to, so I think about, the green parks, right? And towns choosing to use that green park we're going to have a stage. We're going to be really intentional about this space and bringing in various pieces of music or workshops or fairs. And, the green space offers connection, community. And then if you do have the silent disability, let's just say it is PTSD, you can sit on the outskirts of an opened park, and being in opened air and being able to escape if you need to, so having had PTSD in my own past, it's one of those things where I needed that fresh air. And so having that, and then being able to enjoy something like music in the park. And then I call it exposure therapy. So if someone has PTSD or something like that, you can go to something that might be triggering, you're exposing yourself, but then you can always get out.
Right.
So open spaces provide that. And,
Yeah.
so anxiety, anything, social anxiety, which is such a problem since the pandemic.
Yeah.
That's another one where, again, green space, it gives you the opportunity to practice or expose and then get
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of focus on our veterans, right? And law enforcement folks who
Yes.
are probably the biggest proponent or percentage, if you will, of folks that have PTSD just from those, from those experiences that they've
Yes.
had.
Yes.
So it's interesting.
Hmm.
So how do you think, and now we're kind of on the backside of COVID, although
Yep.
there's still a lot of flu and stuff flying around. Um, Pardon the pun, as well as the pollen, which is why I kind of sound a little stuffy. But anyway, now we've got protests going on and election from, as a result of all of this stuff happening in our government. But we've also got wars happening all over the world and a lot of
Yeah.
stress. Of course, the 24-hour news cycle is not, I don't think it is a good thing, but we
No.
tell people turn off the news, turn off the phone, and go outside, right? But
Yeah.
how has that influenced your work in terms of what's happening now and how you're approaching things with clients in the work that you do?
Yes. Yes. That's a really, really good question. It's gosh, since 2020, and I'll just share a really quick story. With my 10-day meditation, it was a silent meditation, and I got this like divine download. It's God's going, you're going to put a course together called Get Your Spark Back, and you're going to help people through chaos and trauma, because that's exactly what we were in 2020. And
Hmm.
bringing light back into someone or in a community. And anyway, I bring it up because I don't think it was an accident that that message was placed in my heart,
Hmm.
because it just feels like it's been one thing after another in terms of stressors, times of uncertainty, what in the heck is going to happen in our future, in our immediate future. And so because of the stress of uncertainty, the messaging on how do you self-regulate? How do you take care of this being? And the being you, how do you take care of
Hmm.
you? And I'll say that 24-hour access to the news, it becomes it's an obsession, and it's a part of the brain that almost becomes an addictive behavior, and a little bit of a possession aspect. And until you can really snap out of it, which is tough to do when such emotion is attached to that
Hmm.
behavior, but that's where I usually I'm thankful for storms for knocking out power, because it's like it's forced intervention of just shutting it all off. And really that's what you got to do, is force intervention of shutting it all off, take a break. And listen, if you go on the greenway or you go to the mountains and you get fresh air, how does it make you feel? And people, I don't know a single person that would say it makes me feel bad.
Right.
Everyone you speak to says it makes me feel so much better. And,
Right.
and so getting out of that, and again, so tying it back into economic development and the importance of really that town planning of what can the town be doing to provide these opportunities, is
Hmm.
getting people to have an opportunity to get away from the news and get away from the stuff that they're staring at, like social media and the short video scrolling.
Yeah.
That is an addictive behavior, so much as it is the I got to see what's on the news next. I got to see what's on the news next, and
Right.
that constant exposure is just feeding into the stress, and it really is very unhealthy. Staying informed, okay, but taking a break from it, and
Well,
because
even
what
in children, I mean, even
mm,
the even the purveyors of this social media don't allow
mhm,
their own children to be on the stuff,
yeah,
and there's some conversation. I know some of the other countries have actually banned or limited children's ability to be on social media, Facebook, TikTok, etc.
Yes.
And I'm particularly interested because in rural communities, we all hear about how our rural healthcare systems are struggling, and many of the rural hospitals are shutting down. How about partnerships between healthcare institutions, particularly in rural areas, and the community? For example, in
Yes.
some places we see, they're supporting the healthcare system, supporting parks and rec departments, putting together, bike rental programs like I know in Charlotte, I think Atrium is the sponsor of the rent a bike program for people that want to use the trails. What are some
Yes.
things that communities can do to partner with folks like you or healthcare professionals
Yeah.
to kind of help with that? Because folks in rural communities are stressed, but in a different way.
Yeah. Oh, they are totally. Yes. And I have actually spoken. It was in a tri-county area of North Carolina, and they put together a wellness retreat. And I came and I spoke, and I got to hear all the challenges from the food deserts. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's quite alarming, even in our very affluent areas, that you can still find food deserts. And anyway, so okay, so Dr. Mascow wrote a book called Community Cure. And the book talks a lot about, it's called the Daniels Plan. The Daniels Plan, I believe it
Oh,
was with,
I've heard of that.
it's
Yeah.
a, yes, it's a
Is that
very,
Dr. Daniel Amen, the brain doctor? Is that his
um,
plan or no?
who
I'm
was
not,
it?
okay, I didn't mean to
I have
interrupt
to,
you,
yeah, it's
but
okay. It's okay. I have to cross-reference because I know that Dr. Oz was a part of it too. And
yeah.
they were doing the community cure plan. There was a couple of fertility clinics that started actually in South Carolina. And what they found was that when they brought these pregnant women together, it actually decreased miscarriages and issues in the delivery process. So the babies were actually healthier. The pregnancies went all to term. It was about a
Mm,
30% improvement in these women, and that was actually significant for this area. And so they took this and said, what is it about bringing community together? And
yeah.
so then that's where the Daniel Plan came in, and they did an initiative out in California, and it was a church, and the church brought their congregation together, whoever wanted to sign up. Dr. Oz sponsored it, a few other gurus. And the Daniel Plan was to put a community of people together in a church, and they're going to go through this process of wellness. And it was nutrition, it was exercise, educating them on how to be well. And the clinical outcomes were far more significant and better than if you were doing it one to one in that primary care setting of just go eat right and exercise. So I think that concept is extremely important, and that's where my community of healthy leaders, this idea came from, because there's so much power in bringing people together. And so in partnerships, that could be a church, that could be, I loved your park and recreation. I think that's an important use of a town's, the park and recreation. That's what it should be all about, beyond just kid programs and things like that. Is what if they partnered with, either through a
Mm-hmm.
grant. So as a clinician, it would be helpful to know how to write a grant, or even if that was an opportunity to say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, we're going to use this grant to partner with Parks and Rec of your town, and we're going to start this community cure project.
Right.
And then it can be more economic, because if you bring a group of people together, price of an option can go down way low. And so you pay what you can kind of concept.
Mm-hmm.
So the economics there, especially in a community setting, you can bring pricing down low. You're thinking about scaling, how many people you're impacting, and it works.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and
so
that
that,
was the precipice for our community prosperity builder scorecard that we've developed.
yep.
It's 90 data points in 12 categories, including, parks and recreation and transportation and all those things we talk about. And if you take all these issues, they're being discussed in public health. Every county in North Carolina, I don't know about South Carolina, but it has to do a public health assessment every year. Well, that data is a lot of the same data that's collected for a land use plan, is the same data that's collected for an economic development. So I don't look at these things as linear. They're really circular. They're all interconnected. So what our goal was to create, we originally started talking about it in terms of quality of life, but that's been such a kind of worn out term that really for me, it's about building prosperity. And that is not necessarily a monetary concept. It's just how prosperous are you? How vibrant are you? How healthy is your community? We talk about healthy communities now. And that's so much more than just economics, right? And monetary issues.
Yes. And I actually think the word that popped in my head was longevity. And, longevity is you want your community to last.
Right.
And so we can't have it die out, literally, and so keeping them as well as possible. Of course, wellness comes up to the individual and their choice, but the people you're around, they will impact your own behavior. We know this to be true. And so if you are in a community that supports an active living lifestyle, which, by the way, walking is free. Fresh air, oxygen, and get outside is free. So that, as far as economics and health equity in the public health sector, again, you're offering things that, shouldn't be astronomically expensive for people. And and anyway, so yeah, I think this is a really important concept. So prosperity, and I'm going to piggyback and say longevity.
Yeah, that's a great one. Thank you. Well, and when we describe the Prosperity Builder Scorecard in our program, we talk about it in terms of one of the things we introduce on the video on our website is this, this epidemic of loneliness. The CDC and the general surgeon did a study based upon, kind of coming on the back end of the pandemic, is that, people are living alone. I mean, we have a large percentage of our population, whether single, elderly, what have you, that live alone. So that connection to community is critically important. And folks if they don't feel connected to their community, whatever that is, going to the farmer's market and seeing your neighbors, for example, or going to the local coffee shop, we have that benefit. There's huge community in our town in Davidson, but some places don't have that. And they're all just trying to create that through a variety of means. And if we don't have that community connectedness, it actually impacts the GDP of that community. So they can translate it into numbers. And we also highlighted Maslow's hierarchy of need, if you remember that from, psychology class in medical school, is you got to have the basics first. Food, shelter, clothing, the basic needs in order to be aspirational and aspire up to something else. And part of that is that whole health question. So
that's
great.
Yeah. And, and I'll say that, I put it in the article I wrote for you is that I lived in Seattle and I had seasonal affective disorder. So it was this, feeling of, there was an isolation there. There's a term called Seattle freeze. And then seasonal affective disorder. Okay. Yeah. I really struggled in that gray weather and the rain and so mainly it was the gray, it was the darkness that was hard. And so here you have Microsoft, you have Amazon, you've got Boeing, you've got hospital systems and healthcare with licensed naturopathic doctors. So we had so much to offer, from transportation, all the things we think about.
Yeah.
However, we still struggle with depression and we still struggle with isolation. And so, that part, wherever someone is living, they must be able to connect to culture and weather. I know we can't always choose where we end up, but weather can have a big impact. It's not something we can control. But the culture aspect, being able to bring people together, because I actually stood on this beach. And it was this beautiful beach on Puget Sound, and you could see Mount Baker to the right and Mount Rainier to the left. And I looked to my right and my left, and there was no one around. And I remember telling my partner, I said, you can live in the most beautiful place in the world, but if you don't have connection to people and friendships and things like that, then that's not a place worth living. And that's the loneliness aspect.
Yeah.
And so
Wow.
again, you can be in these very amazing places that have all the needs met and still feel that. And so hence why I got here. I chase the sunshine is what I tell people. And I'm a much happier person because of it.
You and a lot of people, as we can see by how everyone's moving, they call it the smile, right? From the Carolinas down to Texas and the Gulf Coast and up. Everybody's chasing the sunshine, perhaps.
That's right. That's right.
Interesting.
So, and then where do we get our sunshine? By getting outside.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. So what's next for you, Dr. Lexi? What's your vision, goals on what you're going to be looking at going forward based on from your world?
Yep. So my Get Your Spark Back program it's recorded and online for the do-it-yourselfers. And then I actually go live with people online and also in person. And then I've taken that course to corporations. So really what I want to do is continue building that community of healthy leaders. And leaders are just people who they're movers and shakers in the community. They can have an impact in their own worlds. And because you're someone that somebody else is watching and you can lead by example. And so I'm continuing to build that. And my whole vision is to have a global reach. So the online community will stay online and it'll be a platform of resources to help manage that stress. And it's a little traumatizing out there too. So, so if we can self-regulate better and balance out this high goals, high pressure world that we live in, and balance out the wellness aspect and doing it in a way that is, and even in bite sizes, making it manageable for people. That's the resource I'm building.
Okay, so that's in both, I imagine you could do this not only in corporate environments with corporate leaders and business leaders, but also in communities, right? With elected officials, staff members in local government, I imagine, because they have stressful jobs. A lot of
That's correct.
Folks that work in the city halls, it's a thankless job, particularly since folks are, usually complaining rather than applauding a lot of these folks now. So
I'm actually in current conversation with the town of Huntersville. They reached out to me, and so we are working on a program for their employees. And so and what that is, if in the workplace, it's improving employee engagement and it's an improving employee retention, because if your employees can feel like, oh, I'm more than just a number, like they actually do care about me, they're going to want to stay. And so, so I am actually talking to some towns, and I did a workshop through the Davidson's Park and Recreation for firefighters and police officers. So I mean, there's the options to get in front of an audience are endless. And so building that speaking business, that's absolutely a leg of the Get Your Spark Back program.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, great. I appreciate you as always. You're one of my go-to people on this whole healthcare discussion and what are the alternatives. So we look forward to continuing our partnership, and I appreciate you spending some time with all of us today.
Great. Thank you so much, Kathleen. And I think it's amazing that you are integrating in your background as a nurse into how do we improve economic development as well. And so thank you for what you're doing as well.